Hi everybody, Forerata Live here with another Keyforge video. This one's a little bit different. I'm going to be talking about the CD-ROM method, a way of structuring your learning about a deck and discovering how best to play it. And these are going to be my first impressions. So what is the CD-ROM method? Well, are you already listening to the Call of Discovery podcast? If you love Keyforge, you absolutely should be. It's a brilliant podcast and I can't recommend it enough. Now, previously, earlier this year, they talked about using a structured, deliberate learning kind of approach to discovering your Keyforge deck and how best to play it, really working with one deck and learning its ins and outs as best you can. Recently, Kate, also known as Muffins from the Keyforge group in Leeds, was on and talked about the worksheet she created to help keep track of and prompt herself in using the CD-ROM method to learn about her deck. And I'll put a link for that in the description below as well. Now, listening to those podcast episodes really inspired me. I just got hold of a new deck, the Chef That Moves Conclaves, and I really wanted to think about how best to practice with that deck, how to learn how to use that deck. I knew it was a great deck, but I also knew that it had some pretty serious weaknesses just from first impressions, and I really wanted to have a way of learning how to use it as best I could. So perfect timing, listening to the podcast, always listening to the podcast every time a new episode comes out, and really just thinking, wow, this could really work for me. So let me explain the CD-ROM method to you and then take you through my experiences using it with the Chef That Moves Conclaves for my first few games, my first competitive match, and then some reflections on how it's all been working. So let's start with the definitions. So competition, discussion, repetition, observation, and memorization. What are those all about? Well, competition, that's about taking your deck and playing it competitively, those tough games against people who really know what they're doing. They know their deck, they're playing to win. They're going to give you a really tough test. The discussion bit, that's about talking to other people about your experiences with the deck, how they found it, whether that's in your local play group, a bit more difficult at the moment, but perhaps you're playing online or playing with friends that you do know and you can talk about your deck. The R for repetition, that's just about getting those reps in. That's with playing this deck a number of times, and part of starting this method is thinking about, how many games are you going to want to play with it? You're going to want to play it against different people, different settings, casual play, competitive play, different things like that. Now, observation is tricky, particularly at the moment with COVID-19, social distancing, and the difficulty of playing face-to-face, because it's actually about observation and other players observing you playing, giving you feedback on how you're playing. And lastly, memorization. So that's a really key part. It's actually memorizing your deck list, knowing that you know every card in your deck from memory, and you can be using that in game, understanding what's still to come, what's coming up, what cards you need, where they are, what's gone through, those sorts of things. So that's what CD-ROM is and what it stands for. Okay, so let's have a look at the deck I'm going to be using and training myself with using this CD-ROM method. It's called the Chef That Moves Conclaves. It's a World Collides deck that I picked up recently. Really excited to play it. I love fast decks. It's, you can see here under speed 28. This is an incredibly fast deck. I like decks that play through quickly, that I turn the cards over. It just appeals to me. Few things in here that I really like. I love Vellum and Hide. I think they're really probably underrated. They are superb. If your opponent leaves them on board, you can just really draw through your deck, archive your deck. It gives you a huge advantage. I love Saurians, I love Star Alliance just for the themes. Star Alliance here, the real standout triple com Officer Kirby, again, letting you play all sorts of action cards and, other cards from your deck off house. So loving that. Liking the fact that Saurian's a bit different. I love the Philophosaurus, again, because of that extra ability to draw and archive cards. Triple Stomp, pretty interesting there for some removal. And just overall looking at it, you've got doubles and triples, quite a lot of doubles and triples in here. Triple Discombobulator, double Imperium, triple Stomp, double Philophosaurus, double Tricerian Legere, triple Com Officer Kirby. So I'm kind of thinking there might be some consistency there. So these are the sort of things that appeal to me. Immediately, looking at it, some weaknesses in the deck. Very little amber control. Almost none. Pretty much just Frayne, Xeno Training, those sorts of things. anti-steal with discombobulators, that's handy. So, I can see this is going to be a deck where I'm really going to have to work out how best to play it, particularly dependent on the opponent I'm up against. So I guess that's partly why I wanted to use the CD-ROM method here, because this could be a great deck. It's got some weaknesses I need to learn how to play around and defend against, and really get the most out of the deck. So excited to give it a go. So as I said, one of the things that really inspired me listening to the podcast was the worksheet that Kate had put together and shared, and there's a link in the description below to Kate's original worksheet, and I'll also share the link to mine. So I created my own worksheet here for the Chef That Moves Conclaves, and I'll just take you through it because it gives you kind of my first impressions, how I've used the sheet, and I can talk about some of the things I've already filled in on it. There's obviously more to come as I use the CD-ROM method over a longer period of time. So let's start. First up on the sheet, it just reminds you what the C, the D, the R, O and M stand for, and kind of what the expectation is, and really framing this as an epic quest to learn the secrets of your deck, discover how best to play it. So let me scroll down and let you see what else is on here. So first up, you just got this little bit of intro about why you've picked the deck, what it is, so deck link, when did I start playing, 7th of June, and as I said before, why did I pick this deck? It's a fast deck, I enjoy some spot removal, doubles and triples, good anti-steal but limited amber control, so it's almost like a racing deck but in Worlds Collide. I want to see how far I can push it as a competitive deck. Even though it has some weaknesses, it's not going to be, world championship deck probably, but can I take it pretty far in competitive play? Next up, for the competition part, really looking for you to use this deck in proper competition. Now, that's been fairly challenging at the moment, but I'm taking part in the Australian Online League, and you can check out some of the videos of my games in the previous rounds. I swapped this deck in just before round 4 as one of my decks. Now, here I've just summarised what happened in the match I played earlier in the week. It was a loss, but even when you're losing, the point of this CD-ROM method is you're trying to capture as much value out of wins, losses, every game, really kind of picking up the learning points. What should you take from that game? What can you take into the next one? So here, you can see, what have I learnt about the deck? Well, I've learnt that those stomps, they're absolutely super critical. And the Star Alliance suite, some really key pieces in Star Alliance that work for me, and you'll see that in my comments for some of the repetitions later. I need to hold on to Xeno training where possible because it's kind of my last ditch bit of amber control through capture. I need to try and keep the discombobulators out on the board at all times because they're essential if I'm bursting up to try and prevent steal. But also I kind of learnt that I'm consistently getting to first key faster than the opponent, or getting up to 6 amber pretty quickly. Then it asks you to talk about what issues you might have run into. So here for me, the kind of issues I was running into, I lost a lot of amber when I was on my first key in check to a kind of tribute, sorry about that, combo when they had a Ludo on the board. That was a really good play by my opponent, and also kind of couldn't prevent capture from a City Gates late in the game, which again took a huge amount of amber off me. So just a few more comments. I was unable to control my opponent's board state in this game, which got out of control and actually allowed them to reap to victory, and I couldn't really get them off check, not too much board control in this deck. And it also asked me, what could I have improved? So from this game I kind of talked a bit about better timing of playing out my support houses, my second and third houses, other than just relying on the Star Alliance. Could probably have put out the Logos a turn earlier and kept the deck cycling and get more options on the board. So those are sort of things I took from this, and you can see here there's some more boxes already on the worksheet for some other competitive games. Now, D for discussion, not something I've done yet, but here, here I can fill in notes from my discussion with one of my opponents or one of my friends who plays the game. Somewhere to jot down what I've learned from discussing that deck, what were their insights, what's that sort of triggered, prompted, made me think about that perhaps I wouldn't have thought about before. So that, I guess that's going to kind of spark some ideas in your head. Now, repetition. So this is where you set a bit of a target for yourself. How many times do I plan to play the deck? I've said 50 times here. I don't want to play this deck forever. I don't want it to be the only deck I play, but I want to put in a good load of reps and really feel like I've got the most out of the deck, understood how to play it. And then it asks you how often you're going to reflect on your play. And I guess this is all about that reflective practice and deliberate learning. So again, I've put here every 5 games, which is sort of what they recommend. And I think that's about right, because that's almost like every week or part week for me, just playing a few casual games. I'm coming back and I'm actually stopping and thinking, what have I learned? So under repetition, then there's an opportunity here, if I scroll down, to kind of keep a diary of your games. And I guess that is certainly one of the really important things out of this, just writing down what happens in your games as they happen, not kind of trying to think about it a week or a month later when maybe you've forgotten what actually went on in the game. So you can see here I've tried to jot down and I kind of improved as I went, what was the result? Who was I playing against? So get down my opponent's deck and maybe a link to it so I can go back and look later kind of what kind of SAS level was I playing against. And just some notes about what happened in the game. So in the first game that I lost, I actually got locked out of Star Alliance by Arestraguntus that I couldn't get off the board, protected by a pit lord here. So with no amber controlling Logos or Saurian, I couldn't play anything to get my opponent off check, and they just outpaced me for the 3rd key. And you can see, comments as I go along, struggling with capture by old Bruno's in the 2nd game, even though I won it. So even if you won it, it won the game, you're looking, and this is prompting you to write down immediately afterwards, well, what happened? What do I need to take from this? In my 3rd game, Star Alliance out early, got a fast start, great, but then got Quintrino fluxed. And lost all my Kirby's. So that was something where this suddenly I'm realizing this deck is weak to certain board clears, Quintrino Flux in particular, but generally to board clears, because I'm reliant on keeping those strong Star Alliance cards out on board. So that's what I'm starting to learn from this game and picking up to take forward. The stomps, super important, taking out a key card for my opponent, Science Officer Morpheus. Actually had to use the stomps twice to get rid of him. So that was good. You can see this next game I got completely destroyed, and again I got Quintrino fluxed, and it took out 2 Kirby's, Medic Ingram and Calvin. And again, at this point I'm starting to think already, well, these are turning out to be really key cards in my deck. If I'm going to win, I need them on the board, I need them protected in some way. And I wasn't able to have Discombobulators out in the mid game, and got wrecked by a really big E on the fringes turn where my opponent stole a huge amount from me. So these are the sort of things I'm picking up, and you can see again, if I scroll down, there's plenty of room here for me to keep logging that diary of games, keep talking about what's happening, keep picking up learning points that I'm going to then reflect back on at a later date. So then just starting to fill out this next bit where it's just trying to draw out those experiences of playing the deck, some questions to answer to get you thinking. So, what's the favourite aspect of this deck for me? And as I said before, I really enjoy a fast deck that generates lots of amber. It kind of makes you feel good. Makes you feel good playing Keyforge, getting lots of amber, getting in check. What's the deck's play style? Does it fit an archetype? Well, it is a rush deck. You're trying to race your opponent always, but this deck goes fast, but it's not a rush deck through the actions necessarily. It's a rush deck using the board. I need those Star Alliance creatures on board. I need them reaping. That's how I can outrace my opponent, generating a lot of amber. Combos. What combos does this deck have? Well, not many combos really. It's pretty much all there on the deck list. It's not so much about particular combos, more about just getting those key impactful cards out on the board. But there are a few little combos that are nice that I've picked up as I've played those first few games. Crash Muldoon, I've not used that a lot before, but playing Crash next to, say, a Philophosaurus, or Hyde or Vellum for some off-house additional draw or archiving, that's really neat, that's really nice. Officer Kirby pretty much with any action card in the deck is excellent. How will I change my play in the future to maximise my impact? Again, this is a section I'll be adding to as I go, but initially what I'm looking at is kind of forcing myself and learning to play those secondary houses out earlier. I definitely feel like I get too reliant on the Star Alliance it's great, it's out on the board, but maybe it's just slowly getting whittled away, through attrition, losing the odd piece here and there. And unless I've got those secondary houses out early, I'm really not turning my deck over. And I'm reliant on the Saurians in particular, and also Logos to some extent with cards like Hapsis, to actually have some big bodies that can control the board for me. And if I don't do that and don't get them out, and I'm just playing Star Alliance turn after turn, I've found I can get into trouble. So that's again one of the things I need to now force myself to change and be conscious of when I'm playing. Observation, so this is something I haven't really had much chance to do. Need to set something up with one of my friends who plays Keyforge to observe what I'm doing and give me some feedback. One thing I would say though is, because I'm recording these games and posting them on my YouTube channel and also streaming them on Twitch, I have got the opportunity to do that, or to get someone to look at a video afterwards. So that's just an idea if you're thinking about this and you're not playing face to face. And again, some reflective questions to answer once you've done that observation piece. And what feedback did I expect, what feedback surprised me, and again, what are you going to do? I guess this is the heart of it. It's great to do all this reflectiveness, but what are you going to change? What are you going to take forward into your next game and do differently and be really deliberate about? That's the great piece about this CD-ROM method. Now, finally, memorization. So this is about learning the cards. So you can see pretty much once I started with the deck, after the first game, I just sort of tried to see how I got, and I got to 25 out of 36 cards. And you can see here kind of, I'm getting the doubles and the triples, not too surprisingly the key cards, but missing a few, not picking up everything, certainly not picking up all of the Star Alliance actions and other bits and pieces in there. But then you can see kind of more recently, just yesterday, I did it again, having played 5-6 games now, and you can see I pretty much got all the cards. So yeah, I think I got up to 34 cards there, just missing out on a couple of cards, one in Saurians, Draco Preco, and I didn't pick up on the Cloaking Dongle in Star Alliance as well. But you can see that just playing the games and focusing on remembering the cards, just after a few games, just after a week, my memorization has improved, and that's really going to help me moving forward. And there's more boxes here to fill in later on, so I'll be doing that as well. So that's the worksheet. That's taking you through the worksheet. And again, big thanks to the Call of Discovery podcast. Big thanks to Kate Muffins from the Keyforge group in Leeds back in the UK for putting this together and sharing it, because it really does help to have that template. Otherwise you kind of go, oh, it sounds great, yeah, I get it, competition, discussion, repetition, but hard to kind of force yourself and get into that discipline of recording your games, writing down the learning points, going back and looking at them, going back and reflecting. So that's brilliant. That's been a real help in taking on this challenge. So just to finish the video, let me give you my first impressions on using the CD-ROM method. Not about the deck itself and what I've learned about that deck, but just about using the CD-ROM method. Firstly, I'd probably say I'd definitely recommend it. If you're thinking of starting to use a new deck and you want a really structured way to learn about it and be really deliberate about how you learn about it and really get the most out of those games you're playing with a new deck, then give it a try. I was really inspired by the podcast, hearing people talking about using it. That kind of deliberate learning approach really appealed to me. I knew I needed a bit more discipline and structure around how I might start playing with a new deck. So for me, yeah, it really clicked. And having that worksheet there already prepared, you can just start filling it out with your details, your deck, what works for you. That was fantastic. I think it also helps because it does instill that discipline. Like every game, before you play the next one, don't rush into it, stop, write down some details. Who are you playing against? How did the match go? What worked well, what didn't work well. So you've got all of that content then to look back on when you're reflecting after a few games, to see some patterns, to see those learning points. I think it also drives you memorization. It's easy, particularly on the Crucible Online, to use the kind of clicking on the draw pile as a bit of a crutch to see what's coming. And I think, again, this is really saying, no, you need to memorize your deck. And if you're in face-to-face play, you're going to need to know what cards are in your deck, what's coming, what you need. So that's really helpful as well, to kind of force you into that, and to force you into that really good reflective behavior, talking to people about your deck, thinking about your deck. I found myself, between games, thinking a lot about the deck and how it played and what I need to pick up and change. And I'm definitely going into my next matches thinking, right, these were the things I needed to change up in my play style. You know, in the next game, I know I need to really work on bringing those support houses, those second houses into play earlier around the Star Alliance, not just rely on the Star Alliance, for example. So that's been good as well. I guess a final tip, obviously, I'm recording quite a few of my games, either to stream them on Twitch or I'm using them to create some of these YouTube videos. And I'd really recommend you do that as well, because if you're playing online, it's easy to forget what happened in a game. And it sounds weird, but just recording your matches and going back and playing through them again, what happened, what were the decisions you made, it's easy to forget or misremember. So that's something I definitely suggest to you. And you don't have to be really big into wanting to stream your games. You can download for free something like Streamlabs OBS. You can set it up pretty easily to just record. Click the record button, just record what's on your screen. If you're not planning on streaming it or sharing it, you don't need to worry about any of that. And then you've got a file on your computer that you can go back and you can just play anytime. And I think if you combine recording your games online, taking a notepad with you if you're playing face to face, and using the worksheet in a really disciplined manner, I think it's going to be great. So I'm really keen to keep going with this. I'm going to make some other videos where I just kind of perhaps show some of the gameplay with this deck that I'm using, maybe recap every 5 or 10 games on what I've learnt and you know, some of those reflections and how the method's going. But this has been my first impressions video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you're also inspired to try out this method with maybe one of your new decks or a deck you really want to learn a bit better. I definitely recommend subscribing to and following the Call of Discovery podcast. It's fantastic. I love it. Love listening to it every time an episode comes out. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please do give it a like. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And like I say, you can also catch me streaming games of Keyforge on Twitch at Forerata Live. So please do also find me on there and follow me. Thanks very much for watching.